lot of people will ask, how many characters do you need to read Chinese? But if you Google this question on the internet, you'll get wildly different answers. From some sources that'll tell you just 500 characters is all you need to understand 75% of written Chinese, to others that'll say 2,000, 2,500, or 3,000 or more are required to be truly literate. Today, I want to give you my 2 cents on what I think is the correct answer to this question, and be sure to stick around until the end of the video when I explain why none of this even matters. So if you're new here, you might not know my story. I'm ethnically Chinese, but I grew up here in the United States, and Chinese was my first language until I started learning English at 6 years old. I was always able to speak Chinese just fine, but it also meant that my Chinese abilities kind of got stuck at a 6-year-old's level. I started relearning Chinese in college, which at that point I could only read like a few hundred characters, but now in 2023, I feel like I finally reached a point where I don't feel a pressure to learn any more characters, because I can read just about anything on the internet and understand 99% of what's going on. So I wanted to make this video to share with you all the milestones that got me here where I am today, before I forget about them. Your first milestone is certainly your first 100 characters. Like my first 100 subscribers on YouTube, the process is slow and tedious. You don't know what you're doing and it's just a grind. Unfortunately, I don't remember when I learned my first 100 characters because I was a wee little child back then, so no words of wisdom from me. Well, the next logical step would be 500 characters, and I don't really like this milestone because to me it's nothing but a pretty number. A lot of websites will tell you how much Chinese you can read with just 500 characters, but don't be fooled. There's not much of a difference between 100 and 500 characters. You're still not going to be reading anything other than very easy children's books and educational material that's specifically written for your level. But this next milestone is actually super important to me, and it may be for you as well. And that magic number is 750, or just somewhere between 700 and 800. See, when I reached this point, something amazing happened. I started noticing patterns and similarities between characters. And one of the first character pairs I noticed this with was Shay and Dui. I thought to myself, these characters look almost identical, and they're pronounced kind of similar too. So that's when I started picking up on the patterns in characters. See, before then, every new character I learned was just a completely new and completely unique symbol that I just had to memorize. But after you get to this point, there will be enough characters that you start noticing these patterns. You'll start to understand how characters are built. You'll start understanding the semantic and the phonetic components of characters, that they're not completely random. And if you want to learn more about how characters are constructed and how understanding that can help you learn Chinese faster, I will definitely make a future video on this topic and it will be linked in the description down below. But the best part about this milestone is that learning Chinese characters will actually get easier from this point on. So if you are a beginner and you're struggling with Chinese characters, just aim for the 750 mark, because if you can reach that point, the hardest parts will be behind you. Once you get to that 1,000 mark, this is where things get exciting. Because at this point, you'll start to be able to read easy text and carry simple conversations with real people. And I get it. Many of you guys who are learning Chinese, you don't live in China. You don't have that environment and you don't have somebody to practice with you in real life. But thanks to the internet, you can find over 1,000 native Chinese teachers on italki who can help you improve your Chinese with personalized one-on-one lessons. Whether you want to work on listening, speaking, or reading and writing, there's a teacher who can help you do that. And this is especially valuable if you are at that 1,000 character mark, where you know enough words to begin communicating, but maybe you just never had the practice or you lack the confidence. This is honestly where I am with Korean right now. I've casually learned it for a few years, but I can't carry a conversation. Luckily, italki offers over 150 different languages. So let me show you how easy it is to book a lesson with italki. It's as simple as selecting your language, what you want to work on during your lesson time, the language your teacher speaks, where your teacher's from, and you can also choose between professional teachers and community tutors, as well as a price range that fits your budget. Once you find a teacher you like, just press book lesson. Choose the type of lesson you want at a time that works for you, and you're all done.
안녕하세요.
안녕하세요. 한국 사람 한 명 있어요.
오, 네.
But I'm scared to talk to her in Korean. 한국어로
진짜요?
말하기 무서워요.
I'll be Jimmy Yoon, and you can be Daniel,
Okay.
Daniel.
Daniel. Okay.
네, 괜찮아요. 그런데 어제 음식 축제는 재미있었어요?
네, 맛있는 음식도 많아서 정말 많이 먹었어요. The best thing about italki is the real practice you get, the real interaction with real people. And it's flexible too. This means no commitment, no subscription, and you only pay for the lessons that you need. One-on-one lessons on italki start at just $5, and if you spend $10 or more, you can save an additional $5 if you use my exclusive promo code ABC5. This promo is only available to the first 50 people who sign up, so make sure you check out italki today and let me know how you enjoyed your lesson. So, back to our 1,000 character milestone. At this point, you'll start to be able to read easy children's books, even if you have to look up a lot of characters. You'll start to be able to carry simple text conversations over WeChat, as long as the other person keeps it really simple. This was a cool milestone for me personally because it meant I could start texting my relatives in China without having to auto-translate every single line or resorting to voice messages. At 1,500 characters, you'll have learned enough to be able to read easy children's books, as long as it's not above a first grader's level, and as long as they're not fairy tales with really specialty vocabulary. You'll be able to understand 90% of WeChat conversations, again, providing the other person is not talking about advanced topics. At 2,000 characters, you finally made it to the big leagues now. At this point, you can comfortably read WeChat conversations, comfortably read children's stories, as long as they're not manhua. The thing with manhua is a lot of them are written for teenagers, and those will use advanced vocabulary. At this point, you can start to read newspapers, web pages, and to be clear, you will still struggle. You will need a dictionary, but you can get the general gist of it. So if I were to answer the question, how many characters do you need to read Chinese? I would say at least 2,000. But that's not the complete answer, and I'll explain why in a bit. At 2,500 characters, you would have learned enough to be able to pass HSK 6. And at this point, reading everything across the board will be a lot easier for you. Text conversations are no problem. You'll be able to understand 95% of news articles, and you'll start to be able to read young adult novels. And if it sounds like I'm implying that novels are more difficult to read than news articles, it's because they are. On the HSK website, they say that if you pass HSK 6, you should be able to read novels. No, it does not say that anywhere on the website. Hey, it's editor Andrew here. Honestly, I'm not sure what I was referring to, and I apologize for that, but the point I was trying to make is that people tend to overestimate HSK 6. Like, most novels are written for a high school level, but HSK 6 will only put you, like, in the middle of elementary school. And that's if we don't consider the speaking aspect of it. I'll show you a sample from a 4th grade textbook here in a second, so let's get back into the video. Finally, at 3,000 characters, you would have reached a level similar to a middle school Chinese student. Theoretically anyways. At 3,500 characters, you would have reached a level similar to an average high school student. Now, I can't really speak on these levels because I'm not there yet. So I took a test online that estimates how many Chinese characters you know, and my results came out somewhere around 2,800. And if I were to honestly assess myself, I would say that my Chinese reading level is similar to that of a 4th grader. But what I will say is that HSK 2.0 ends at 2,500 characters, and I think that's the perfect point to end at. Because in my experience, after you get to that point, you'll be able to understand 95% of anything that you could possibly encounter. And for me personally, my drive to learn more characters kind of diminished after that point, because it's enough to get by. But, and this is a big but, there's a problem to all of this. All of what I told you is true, assuming you know an equivalent amount of words as you do characters, because a character in Chinese is not necessarily a word, and Mandarin Chinese is heavily reliant on multi-character words. So it doesn't matter if you can read individual characters if you don't know the words they're a part of. And sometimes you can't even pronounce the character correctly if you don't know the word it's a part of. For example, this character, da, it means big. Even beginners know that. But if you saw it in this word, you'd be incorrect to say da fu. Instead, the correct pronunciation is dai fu, and it's a term for doctor. So truthfully, how many characters do I need to read Chinese is the wrong question to ask. What you need to be asking is, how many words do I need to read Chinese? How many words do I need to communicate in Chinese? But it's quite frustrating because all over the internet, people gloss over this fact. Even Chinese people themselves will only talk about how many characters they know, and they'll never talk about how many words they know. The only thing I found online about the vocabulary size of a native Chinese speaker was this questionable article from basically Chinese Quora, where this person claimed that a native speaker in not just Chinese but also English will know between 40,000 and 60,000 words. Now, I find this a little questionable because according to this website's estimate, I only know 18,000 English words. But then again, they also say that a native English speaker should know 20,000 to 30,000, so maybe I'm just illiterate. But I guess the reason nobody talks about it is because it's really difficult to estimate the number of words you know. Just look at the wide range of numbers you get when asking how many words a native speaker should know, from 15,000 all the way up to 60,000. But the good thing is, the number of words you need to communicate in any language are all roughly the same. A few thousand for basic conversation, and around 10,000 to be fluent. Something to keep in mind when learning Chinese though, is that you typically don't learn characters and words at the same rate. So I made a little graph to help explain this. On the x-axis is the number of characters you know, or you can think of it as your learning journey. On the y-axis is the ratio of characters that you know to words that you know. So when you first start out learning Chinese, there's roughly a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning when you learn your first 100 characters, you will know 100 words. But this gap will start to widen as you learn words at a faster rate than you will learn characters. And this is because you will start learning compound words that take advantage of characters you already know, as well as alternative definitions of characters you already know. So let's say by the time you get to 1,000 characters, you would have learned 2,000 words, a 1-to-2 ratio. And this gap will continue to widen because the most common characters have a ton of usages. They can be used in a lot of compound words and they have a lot of alternative definitions. Eventually though, it'll fall because you'll be only left with rare characters that don't have a lot of usages. After all, that's part of what makes them rare. And just for fun, I made another curve that shows what a native speaker's learning curve might look like. So because native speakers will already know how to speak the language before they learn how to read and write it, this curve will start off very high, but eventually it'll dip and follow a similar trajectory to a Chinese learner's. But it's also probable that native speakers will know more words per character than Chinese learners, simply because they're immersed in the language and use it a lot more. So the moral of the story is, aim for 750 characters before you decide to give up. But most importantly, focus on words and learning to communicate in the language instead of how many characters you know. And don't forget to take advantage of that italki offer to get $5 off of your lesson with the code ABC5. Now this video is just my opinion, based on my experience, to answer the question how many characters you need to read Chinese. But I wonder if there could be a scientific way to answer this question. A data-driven method to decide once and for all if 500 characters is all you need to understand 75% of written Chinese. I wonder.